John Stamos fiercely defends Lori Loughlin, blames estranged husband Mossimo Giannulli for Varsity Blues scandal, and reacts to their recent separation. The defense came in hot, and it came from someone who has known Lori Loughlin longer than most viewers have been alive. On the Good Guys podcast, John Stamos didn't hedge or hide behind careful Hollywood phrasing. He spoke plainly and emotionally about his friend, and he aimed his criticism squarely at Mossimo Giannulli. Before we go any further, hit subscribe and turn on the bell so you get first-hand updates on this story and others, because the fallout here keeps evolving, and honestly, it says a lot about loyalty, blame, and what a scandal does to a family. Stamos' words, delivered with the familiarity of a 4-decade friendship, reframed a saga many people thought they already understood, and they arrived right as Loughlin and Giannulli's marriage quietly fractured in the background. Stamos' appearance on the Good Guys podcast was unusually candid, even for an actor who has never been shy about the people he loves. He described Loughlin in deeply human terms, the person he has watched for years, not just the actress the public projects opinions onto. In doing so, he reminded listeners that celebrity headlines can flatten real people into caricatures. His tone carried the weight of someone who lived alongside the scrutiny that exploded in 2019, then lingered for years. By tying his defense to specific moments, like the legal aftermath and the personal toll, Stamos didn't just offer a friendly testimonial, he offered context. He wanted listeners to hear not only that Loughlin is, in his view, kind and steadfast, but also that the scandal's aftershocks have been more than professional setbacks. They have been emotional earthquakes. Framed this way, his comments were less about scoring points in a debate and more about restoring complexity to a story that got reduced to a meme. Then came the hard edge. Stamos labeled Giannulli a narcissist and said he will never speak to him again. That is a severe line to draw, and it lands differently when it is drawn by someone who occupied the front row of the last 6 years. It suggests that, in Stamos' view, the harm went beyond bad judgment or a single criminal scheme. It reached into the private corners of a relationship and, perhaps, controlled the narrative from within. Using the word narcissist signals a pattern of self-directed decision-making that sidelines partners, and it tracks with Stamos' larger goal here, to move blame away from Loughlin as architect and toward Giannulli as driver. Whether listeners agree or not, the intensity of that language guarantees attention, and it hints at why he feels protective of Loughlin even now, as the headlines pivot from courtrooms to separation. Stamos' argument was simple, maybe even stark. Loughlin wasn't the mastermind. He pushed the idea that decisions flowed from Giannulli, not from a joint operational plan. That framing matters, because the public memory of Operation Varsity Blues often collapses nuance into a single punchline: rich parents cheating. By separating roles, Stamos is not rewriting legal history. Both parties pleaded guilty, but he is asking the public to reconsider moral authorship. In media coverage, that was always the gray area, the place where speculation outpaced evidence. When someone with standing in the story asks people to slow down and reconsider who led, it nudges the conversation back to specifics, emails, payments, stage profiles, and away from a broad brush that paints both people the same color. Those specifics are still bracing. Loughlin and Giannulli paid $500,000 to get their daughters designated as USC crew recruits, even though they were not rowers. The scheme ran through Rick Singer's now infamous side door, a pipeline that relied on fake athletic profiles, manufactured images, and opportunistic access points inside athletic departments. It was, and remains, the most visible college admissions case in modern memory, a shorthand for entitlement and the ways money bends systems that are supposed to be competitive. Even now, years later, the dollar figure sticks in the mind, not just for its eyes, but for how directly it seemed to buy identity, athlete, recruit, insider. Legally, the end came fast and unforgiving. In 2020, both Loughlin and Giannulli pleaded guilty and served prison time, with fines and supervision to follow. For Loughlin, it was nearly 2 months, for Giannulli 5. Those sentences did not end the story. They began the long tail of consequences. Careers slowed, public trust cracked, and family life took on a new shape under the weight of anger, curiosity, and constant commentary. If you step back, it is a case study in how punishment intersects with reputation, how a relatively short sentence can stretch into years when the court of public opinion keeps the file open. Stamos' current defense, then, is not just about the past. It is about interrupting that long tail and rebalancing how people talk about it now. Into that context came the personal news that changes everything, at least privately. Loughlin and Giannulli have separated after nearly 28 years, living apart without a formal divorce filing at this time. The phrasing was careful, taking a break, no legal proceedings underway, but the meaning was clear. The partnership at the center of the scandal is no longer a day-to-day union. People close to the couple described it as a painful moment, and for Loughlin in particular, a devastating one. The separation tracks with a broader arc, a couple weathering legal storms, public pressure, and now facing divergent paths, whether in values, priorities, or simply the ability to keep carrying the weight together. For Stamos, the split seemed to amplify an already strong message. He called Loughlin a saint, words that could sound glib if not anchored in time spent, shared sets, and proximity. For decades of friendship do not make someone correct, but they do make them credible. He painted a portrait of a person who shows up for others, who, even during her lowest moments, kept caring for friends and family. That picture runs counter to the cardboard cutout many people carried in their heads, the celebrity who cheated and shrugged. And that tension between a person who is tender in private and the headline that hardens in public is exactly where Stamos wanted listeners to sit. He has chosen his side, and he is telling everyone why. The coverage machine, as it always does, amplified the most combustible lines: narcissist, never speak to him again, saint. But the second beat in that coverage was a refresher course on the timeline, the payments, the fake crew profiles, the prison terms, the gradual return to public life. That echo, the way news outlets braid new comments to old facts, is how collective memory gets updated. When the separation became public, stories connected dots, from the house listed for sale to the absence of divorce filings, and they added human color. Reports that Loughlin felt betrayed, that reconciliation was unlikely. In a media environment that can reduce people to their most viral moment, this recalibration matters because the narrative now includes an end to the marriage as well. Inevitably, the spotlight moved to the daughters, Olivia, Jade, and Isabella Rose, not just as footnotes, but as young women who lived through the public shaming that was never theirs to choose. Their names were part of the scandal because the scheme was designed around them, crew recruits who did not row, and for years they have been cast either as beneficiaries or as collateral damage. Recent reporting suggests they are supporting both parents and seeking peace, which sounds small until you remember the scale of the noise around them. If there is a path forward for this family, it likely runs through adult children deciding that grace is better than grievance, that healing beats headlines. Whether the outside world allows that space is another question entirely, but inside the home, it may be the only way this ever quiets down. So where does this leave the story? Stamos has tried to shift the moral lens, moving blame toward Giannulli and compassion toward Loughlin. The separation adds consequence without spectacle, a human into a long and imperfect chapter. The legal facts remain what they were, the money was paid, the profiles were faked, the time was served. But the personal facts are evolving. A friend speaks, a marriage pauses, and a family, still under the lights, tries to stitch something whole from what is left. If you have been following since 2019, you might think you know the ending. Maybe you do. Or maybe, as often happens with people we watch from a distance, the ending is not a verdict. It is a set of quieter choices the public never sees. Either way, if you want to catch the next turn in this saga, subscribe and turn on the bell because the conversation is not over, and the next voice we hear might change the way we remember the last 6 years. In the end, this is a story about accountability and advocacy living in the same house. Stamos chose advocacy, loudly and without apology. The courts handled accountability years ago, swiftly and publicly. What remains is the human work, reconciling who people were with who they want to be now. That work, unlike a sentence, does not have a fixed end date. It moves at the speed of trust, and it is measured imperfectly by how gently we speak about each other when the cameras are off.